Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, the last podcast is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with ya. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going so good. So happy to be here with you, Patrick. I have to admit, though, that the hair situation, specifically my hair situation, is getting a little bit untenable. It is getting a little bit out of control.
Can I tell you that today we embarked on the first ever, hey, Sarah, I need you to cut the back of my hair because it was too long and too in my neck. And I can't see back there, so I can't do anything. So just I don't know, go to YouTube. Here are some clippers. Here are some scissors. Let's throw down a towel and get this done.
Yeah, the day is fast approaching. The difficulty, ideally I would just not try to cut my hair, but the difficulty is one that I'm just not built for long hair, and two, I am not built for hats. I am not a hat person. And I cannot express to you how much I wish I was a hat person, that I could wear hats, that my head shape and my face shape were that it all blended together with hats, and I would wear a hat and the world would rejoice. That is not the case. I do not look good in hats. My body rejects hats.
Speaking of not looking good in hats, I turned on Sonic Forces to check my original character in that game, and he's wearing a hat and he looks terrible. He's an ugly little duck man, and I hate him. I had the game on for all of 7 seconds and then was oh no, I'm not going to be playing this at all. But speaking of my copy of Sonic Forces, if you would like to borrow it someday when we are back to mailing things, you should email us, put your name on the list. You can send an email to Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and give us a mailing address, and then I send it out to you. You play it for as long as you want, but that'll all happen someday when we can all go out and get our haircuts and get our hair cuts. We can all schedule appointments to get our haircut.
There we go. Talk around it.
Woo! But yes, do that. The last thing we are obviously discussing Super Metroid today. This is part of our awesome retro month in April. I don't know why I just called it awesome, but I did. We are continuing this through the rest of the month. Next week, we are playing Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. So if you have any observations or cool things that you remember from playing Yoshi's Island, or if you're playing along with us, you can shoot us an email at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And then the week after that, we are playing Star Fox, which again I have promised I'm going to play to the end of.
Yeah, we're saying this is a promise. We are playing Star Fox. It's like an affirmation. I'll say it when I wake up in the morning and face myself in the mirror.
That's right. It's one of the. It's a choice you have to make every day, right? When you wake up. Today I'm gonna play Star Fox. So I don't know, we'll be okay. On Tuesday's episode, we spoke briefly about, we read Connor's email. Connor emailed us and was, first of all, gave us the inside scoop about those commercials for Paper Mario and Mario collections. So thank you again, Connor. And he was also like, hey, come check out my Zelda stream. Well, he wrote to us with some bad news this week. He said, I've got some bummer news. The stream for Relief is postponed. As of yesterday, my internet connection took a severe dive, and after replacing both my router and modem today, it has not improved. I've been trying to solve the issue with a repair rep over the phone, but as of now, we are unsure what to do. I haven't been able to pull up a speed test. Sorry, I haven't been able to even pull up a speed test web address to give you an idea of where we're at.
Oh man,
Some of this going around right now, right?
that is a bummer because like the only thing you need right now is internet.
Yeah. Well, and also we have all trained ourselves now to like just use like we don't have our DVDs anymore. We don't have our books anymore. We don't, like we rely on the internet now, and if it's being throttled within an inch of its life, that's a huge bummer. So sorry, Connor. If you get that up and going again, shoot us an email, and we'll be there. Okay, Mark, are you ready to get into Super Metroid?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so maybe we start here with just like building some context for the lay of the land when Super Metroid came out. This is 1994, several years into the Super Nintendo's life, not far off from the the launch of the Virtual Boy, of course, relevant to this conversation, and the Nintendo 64, right? Um, and it was we're talking third game in the series, very much like we were talking about last week with Link to the Past. And again, sort of to me, this feels like what they this feels like a realization of the Metroid formula, like Metroid character, the Metroid aesthetic, in a way that the previous two games hadn't like fully achieved. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I feel like that's like true of a lot of that Super Nintendo games where and
Mm-hmm.
not just like Nintendo first party, but in general it was like these people who had been making 8-bit games, the world was suddenly open to them with 16-bit games. And like I feel like Final Fantasy is a great example of
Yeah,
this as
totally.
well. I do feel like Super Metroid kind of like fulfills the promise of what the early Metroid games are. Although so I am a latecomer to the Metroid franchise. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really with Prime until it was like truly on my radar. And so I'm curious, like, what was the state of Metroid in like at this time? Because like, has Metroid ever been like a huge blockbuster franchise? Like,
No, no, and I mean one of the reasons that they waited until 1994 to actually put this game out was that Metroid it didn't drive sales in the same way that Mario or Zelda did. So like the the previous two games, there was the NES one, which is still roundly considered a classic, if an impenetrable classic, and the Game Boy one, which sort of just came around in the time when like they were making Game Boy games of everything, right? Like we got a Kid Icarus 2 for crying out loud on Game Boy, and I feel like this Metroid 2 fell into that same bucket, right? Of like we're just making it because like it's IP that we have, and the game's not super fleshed out, and like Metroid 2 has all kinds of problems.
well, and also, and I like could be totally wrong here, but also weren't both Kid Icarus and Metroid, they were developed
Yep.
by EAD1, which like also developed the Game Boy hardware. And they also did like Super Mario Land. So like, like Metroid and Kid Icarus are kind of their babies. So then it would make sense that they'd be like, and also we're going to make some Game Boy entries in these series.
Yeah, so I don't think that there was like a huge fervent like anywhere certainly not like Metroid is less popular in Japan than it is in the States, but even in North America, I don't think there was any like specific excitement for Super Metroid before it came out. Obviously, in the years since, it has been sort of crowned like the king of video games, the father of the Metroidvania genre. And not without reason. Like it is it establishes both like a Metroid formula and a formula of like how to make the player loop back around on a world, like getting new power ups, and this sort of what is available to you changing based on what equipment you have coming into it.
So I know that you really love this game, and so I am curious
Hmm.
to know like how you came to Super Metroid.
Sure. Well, I originally played it on the Super Nintendo, and this is like when it came out in 1994. Um, and it is a game that I don't really remember how it came into my possession. But like I think,
Because did
hmm,
you
I don't
love
know.
like original Metroid? Like when did you get
No,
into Metroid in general?
I got into Metroid in general with Metroid 2, The Return of Samus,
Whoa.
on the Game Boy. Yeah. So like that was, I had played a little bit of the original Metroid just, on friends' NESs and never really got anywhere because the game's so hard. But like I really sunk my teeth into the second one, and would play it on like long car trips. That's a game that I actually beat like in the original Game Boy cartridge of it. And like it is a long slog of a game. There's no map. Samus is too big. Like, but for whatever reason, I fell in love with the aesthetic and of like hunting Metroids. So maybe that was it. Maybe when Super Metroid came out, I knew it as the sequel to this awful Game Boy game. And that's why I got into it. So you mentioned that you didn't get into the Metroid series until Prime?
Yeah, so like I was aware of Metroid, I was aware of Samus. Like
Mhm.
I knew the series existed, I knew the characters. I have to this day never played Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. I was aware of like Metroid and Super Metroid from playing going to like friends' house, seeing them playing it for a little bit. But these are not games where you're like, I'm gonna have an enjoyable experience playing for this for like 20 minutes, picking up,
Yeah.
like from my friend's save and like that sort of thing. So it was not until Metroid Prime came out that like the series was reintroduced to me, and then
Mhm.
like the GBA entries, like Zero Mission. I love those games so much.
Yeah. Well, you were a big GBA boy, right? So like you
Right.
were looping back around on a lot of like the classic Nintendo library with the GBA, but then there are also these two like stellar examples of 2D Metroid brand new to the Game Boy Advance.
So I had played Super Metroid, but this playthrough was like the first time that I in one like go have played through like Super Metroid.
Wow, that blows my mind a little bit because Super Metroid is a game that I probably play once a year. Maybe not quite that frequently, but like going back to it feels like coming home, right? So again, I just want to call up an email that Martin sent to us a couple weeks ago. It was in regards to the Link to the Past at the time. I'm just going to reiterate it. He says, one thing I would love for you to discuss is how well these games would suit someone who has no nostalgia for them and has become used to games with 21st century quality of life improvements. I know that will be tough as your playthroughs will be bundled with tons of emotions, but I trust you two to step back and give an objective opinion. Martin, I want you to know I tried very hard as I was playing the game this time to view it not as like just my like super comfort food, which it in April of 2020, like if anything even remotely resembles comfort food, I'm like, give it to me. I want to zone out. But so yeah, so you maybe didn't have to put that filter on as much, huh?
Yeah, for sure. So Martin, I've got your back. Definitely.
um okay, so we've got another email from Josh. Josh is playing along with us. And so I'll just read the email here. There are a couple observations and a couple questions, so maybe we'll stop between each observation.
Great.
Okay. um the email goes, hey guys, just sharing some Super Metroid impressions. Super Metroid was actually one of my biggest blind spots in gaming. My first Metroid experiences were with Prime, which I loved, but the only 2D Metroid I've beaten is Zero Mission. Mark, is this you? Did you write this email?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go back and play Super Metroid, so thanks for the excuse. I've seen speed runs of it before, but obviously playing it is a way different experience entirely. Anyway, I figured I'd give some specific things that stuck out to me. Item number one, floaty jumps. The jump is way floatier than I was expecting. I was put off at first, especially as someone who's played a ton of Metroidvanias in the past, but I like it now. It feels different. It just wasn't what I had expected. So the way Samus controls, Mark, how do you feel about the way she jumps?
I found it to be one of like I liked the fact that her jump is pretty floaty because you use it to your advantage even from the beginning. The ability to
Yeah.
like jump really high, and then that just kind of like expands as you power up through
Yeah.
the game.
And when you get the high jump boots, and you are like clearing an entire screen vertically, the jump needs to be floaty in that regard, right? So you can actually like navigate the space. I also think one of the cool like mechanics of the game is like Samus's two kinds of base jumps, right?
Hmm.
That like if you jump and then start to move her, she does this sort of like standing jump which maybe gets more height, but you can't really like move as far horizontally. Versus if you are already moving when you jump and she starts to somersault, and like those two jumps have different physics to them, and it's a kind of cool thing to like wrestle between those two.
Hmm.
His next point, the wall jump is very hard. It took me a while to be able to do it at all, although I guess it isn't necessary. I've seen speedrunners who do it effortlessly, though, so I kept trying to do it, and I probably can only do it like half the time successfully at this point. Do you guys ever do the wall jump? Mark, do
I
you do the
I
wall jump?
think I pretty much made it through this playthrough without purposefully doing the wall jump. I think I inadvertently did it a couple of
Hmm.
times, but for the most part, no, because I find it. I mean, I found a number of like the things you're supposed to do to control Samus in this game to be very complicated. And so no,
Hmm.
I didn't even bother to attempt the wall jump.
The wall. So did you not do the part where there are like the little green monkey guys that like hop back and forth up the passageway?
I think I just. I mean, are we when we say wall jump, are we talking about space jump? Because I think I just space jumped the whole thing.
Oh, I mean, if you had the space jump at that point, then yeah, you wouldn't need it. But yeah, and yeah, no, the wall jump is different, right? The wall jump is like actually bouncing off the wall, and you can do it at any point in the game.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely never purposefully did that.
So the reason that the wall jump is complicated is that Samus can only do it when she's in this like stance where she's like pushing against the wall, and the way you have to do it is you have to be doing a cartwheel jump be up against the wall and then push the opposite direction and then like she kind of does something like this and then you can push the jump button, which is like out of order for how most double jumps work. So I look, Josh, this is something I was not able to tackle when I was playing this when I was 12. So it's not an easy thing to do. Do I use it? Yeah, but it's because this game is in my veins, right? Um, Next note from Josh: the Brinstar theme. I know it made it pretty far in the music tournament, but having played the game, I more greatly appreciate how much of a banger the Brinstar theme is. It rules. Mark, what do you think about music in general in this game?
I thought it was really good. It's really creepy. My husband, like while I was playing it, even mentioned like apropos of kind of nothing. He was just like, "Wow, that's like really creepy music." It is like it is, and but it's also, I mean, it's a banger. Like, what more can you say? Like the way it like builds on itself, and it's appropriately creepy, and then other times, like it's a little bit more rockin'. It's really good.
Yeah, and every now and then that like little fanfare comes out, where that like bum baka bum 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 bum, and you're just like, whoa, whoa, I'm a hero now for a second. Okay. Next observation: the metal as hell statue. This is very specific, but when I first saw that gold statue thing with all the bosses kind of melded together, it really hit me how Alien and H.R. Giger influenced this game. The statue was weirdly cool to me. Um, I always forget about that thing.
Yeah, so this is like before you take the elevator down for like the final
Hmm.
time, right? And it's like that big like amalgamation of everything with like the five or whatever different colored gems
Yeah,
on it. Yeah, that thing is awesome.
And it is cool that like yes, you do take it into like it's an elevator into the main area or the main final area, but you encounter it super early in the game, right? Like it is something that you see well before, like if you come across it, right? Like most of this game you can just sort of like not see, or see way out of order. But like it is encounterable very, very early on in the game before you even have like super missiles or have fought any bosses. Just this cool golden statue thing. One last observation or one last question from Josh, and then we'll go into just our experiences with this specific playthrough. Josh says, "Is the podcast's name a pun or a reference of some sort? I've been listening for a couple of years now, and it seems too specific to not be a reference to something. I feel like I can't be the only one wondering this."
Josh, I wish I could tell you that it was. I don't think it is. Not that I
No,
remember,
it's not.
anyways. Yeah.
Here's here's the thing. I think both of us liked the idea of having a 3-word name, right? Like that was appealing. And then I was like, the only thing is we have to have the word Nintendo in the title of the show so that it can be discoverable. And then beyond that, I don't know how we landed at cartridge and society. But I think we thought it sounded classy.
No, there's no
You
way
don't think that's right?
that's the reason we landed on it. But no, but I do think you're right that it's kind of lost to time. My memory is that you came up with it. But I have
because I thought it was classy.
but I have no memory of like, yeah, how it came to be.
Our early logo was like a seal, right? Like an academic seal.
Yeah.
So I think I still do think that we were aiming for something that sounded like joke classy or just classy, and I don't know what the difference is between the two.
It's a thin line for sure.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Josh, no, it's not a pun or a reference or anything, and we just own it now. So Mark, tell me about your general impressions of playing this game.
Okay, I really, really liked it. With the caveat that I used a guide for the entire thing because I think I would have hated it if I tried to play without a guide.
So that tracks for me. I have an internal guide basically for a lot of this game, and I always get turned around and confused and frustrated in Meridia.
Oh my gosh.
When the game reaches that part, it is so it punishes you for falling in ways that are really terrible and obnoxious, and like the fact that when you finish up there and you finally do like beat that boss, there's no real like fast travel option to get you. Like the lack of fast travel in this game in general is like a real knock against it in 2020, right?
Yeah, I have a really hard. I mean, I've talked about it on the show. Like, I hate not knowing what I'm supposed to do or where I'm supposed to go in games. I hate like the feeling of being lost and just like stumbling around until you hopefully like figure out where you're supposed to go or what you're supposed to do. And I think this game would drive me crazy. Like I just wouldn't play it. I just wouldn't play it if I didn't have like the ability to be like, where am I supposed to go right now?
Yeah, and it like because the game itself doesn't really have outside of the like very beginning of the game, there's no text that explains anything, right? Or even really establishes your priorities, and there are no waypoints on the map even, right? Like you map out an area and like they're just little dots on it, and it's like there is an item, there's something there.
Yeah, like I feel like the later games do a much better job of, like letting you mark the map or at least like have some sense of customization, or the maps are just more explicit. Whereas this, it was like, I have a hard time believing anybody finds the map useful.
Yeah, I mean, I find the map useful once I've like been through an area a bunch of times, or when I'm coming back through Brinstar after having done like all of Norfair and like little bits of the ghost ship, and then I've got like all this other stuff, and I'm like, okay, what rooms didn't I get to last time? Then I know where to like get whatever extra little items. But yeah, it is not. It's interesting that you say that other games, like later Metroids, do it better. They certainly do it differently, right? Like, I think there's a hard balance between giving you enough direction and giving you no direction. And this one, I think, definitely does err on the side of not giving you enough direction. Um, let's talk a little bit about how the game opens, because I think Super Metroid has one of the strongest like first 20 minutes of like any game ever. Um, Go.
I mean, I love the presentation in this game in general. I really feel it like so for like all of the things I'm going to talk about where I found it challenging or like it shows its age in certain
Yeah.
areas. I think one thing that it has like that holds up is the aesthetic, is the sound, is like the design. Um it is, yeah, like on that part it is incredible.
It is also worth noting that at the very beginning of this game, when there is a voice, there's text on the screen and a voice that speaks to you from your Super Nintendo says the last Metroid is in captivity, the galaxy is at peace, which in 1994 was the longest uninterrupted stretch of dialogue I had heard coming out of a video game ever. And it blew my mind. You'll never hear speaking again.
Well, it's amazing to me how much the like it was mentioned earlier, but like the aesthetic is ripped basically like exactly from Aliens.
Mhm.
But like it works so like it's so funny to watch like I don't know what you would call like the uh so you like turn on the game and you let it sit for a while and it starts like playing this thing and it's like 1994 Nintendo Super Metroid and it's basically just a rip off of the first Alien trailer and
Yeah.
then but like it's just like cool to see it rendered basically in like this like 16 bits and like even just like the start screen is so neat where like you turn on the game um like there's like this Metroid in a test tube and it like pulls out more and I think like it's like scientists are like laying on the ground in this like lab
Yeah.
where this Metroid like all of it is just like so iconically cool.
Yeah. Well, and yes, the way the like the first moments of the game, including when you first turn it on, like you say, that 1994 Nintendo, and then it doesn't say Super Metroid right
It says
away. It says
Metroid 3.
Metroid 3.
Yeah.
Which I always found like the like incongruity there, like just like fascinating. Like there's something here that like I'm not meant to understand or I don't get to understand. Why are they calling it Metroid 3 and not Super Metroid? Um, and then yeah, like you say, you see the so it's like panning across the parts of this scene of like the Metroid in the jar, or like this big tube thing and the scientists on the ground, and then like you push a button and like that's the start screen. So that's like something that's sort of drilled into you visually, as you're playing the game, and but you're playing the game, you're experiencing the game before you even start playing it, because once you start the game, it does this opening cinematic, with complete with the only voice acting in the game, and like this nice little setup of like Samus, like it recaps the end of Metroid 2, and my brain just about exploded when I was 12 because I knew those beats, I played them. Um, and then like you get called back to that the space station, and your brain is already sort of putting it together that like, oh, that's where I saw, that's what I see on the start screen, is that station and the Metroid in this tube. And then when you run through that area, that tube is busted open and the Metroid is nowhere to be found. So like the game, it does such a great job of introducing like, here's normal, like here's safe, and then as soon as you get there, it's not safe anymore. I
Yeah,
love it.
you were saying that the first 20 minutes of this game are like iconic, and they completely are. Again, you go back to the planet, and it's raining, of course, which is just like my favorite thing
Yep.
in video games. But like the opening of this game is so cinematic, which is amazing because they're doing it in 16 bits. But
Yeah.
and I think like obviously out of necessity, the later you get into the game, it becomes more like a video game. And it
Mm-hmm.
loses some of that like quality. But yeah, the opening of it is just astounding.
Yeah, and I would say that it is then also matched by the end of the game, which it's not really as cinematic, but it because it tells it tells the story of the end of the game all like in-game graphics, and really without telling you that it's doing storytelling. So should we like spoil this? I guess
Yeah, why
the
not?
game's 26 years old, so just play it. But there's like you encounter the original Metroid that Samus rescued back at the end of Metroid 2, and it is huge. And it has sucked dry all these other monsters in this area. Like you encounter their lifeless husks of corpses, and they just wither away into dust like Thanos snapped him away. And including you see it suck the life out of a creature that you encountered first in the previous room that you are unable to harm in any way, shape, or form. Awesome, right? An awesome little like gameplay thing, and it just destroys it. And then it like goes after you. And it latches on like the Metroids previously in this section have done, and starts draining the health out of you, and drains you down to 1 health point, and then like backs off. And as soon as it backs off, you're able to like move around and shoot at it if you want. Like at no point does it like take control away from you to start telling you this story. And then like it makes some like little kind of cute squeaky noises and then flies away. Um, cut ahead to like 10 minutes later when you're fighting Mother Brain. Mother Brain's got you on the ropes, again draining you down to like a single health point or something near that. And then the Metroid swoops in and saves you from Mother Brain. And again, this is all while you are still playing. Like the game doesn't change at all during these moments. Um, it attacks Mother Brain, it drains all the life out of her, and then deposits that life into you. Meanwhile, Mother Brain stands back up and is like attacking the Metroid like repeatedly, and the music is just dun 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 dun. It's awesome. And then the Metroid like leaves you all super powered up, and it like swoops in to attack Mother Brain, and Mother Brain takes it out. And it like explodes over you, raining down the powers of the hyper beam or whatever it's called. And then you just blast Mother Brain with its energy, and it's the coolest thing ever.
It really is. That the final fight is so effective. Like that entire sequence is like so effective. And like I didn't find the Mother Brain fight to be particularly challenging. I didn't really
No,
find I didn't really find any of the boss battles to be challenging, but that was okay. Like they were I felt like the good ones were inventive. And so it was like, yes, you could like kill the bosses pretty easily. Like which one is it? Or like Dragon or whatever, where like if it picks you up, you can use your hyper beam and just like electrocute it basically. Um
yeah,
you know, like that kind of stuff. But I feel like the joy of the game is not the combat. I think the joy of the game is definitely not the combat. The joy of the game
interesting.
is like similar to Breath of the Wild, where like the joy of it is discovering the world. And you know
Mm-hmm.
how like because I feel like for it's very thoughtfully crafted. Like each section is really distinct. My favorite one was actually like the wrecked ship. I really
Yeah,
liked the wrecked ship area. I liked the Fantoon boss a lot, and then I loved little like Gronk droids that are walking around when
they're so funny. I love them.
So I love that it's just like this pastiche of like sci-fi references and like movies that people like. Um, but I feel like the Mother Brain fight, just like you were saying, the beginning of the game is cinematic. The end of the game is also like fittingly like big and interesting.
And it's also worth pointing out that like the Mother Brain fight has kind of like two phases to it, right? There's like one where she's just a brain in a jar. And that is exactly like one for one the exact layout of the Mother Brain fight in the original Metroid, which is also like an area that you run through super early in the game too, right? Like you end up going through in reverse order the sort of Mother Brain room before like the lights even come on this planet. So like it's very it is maybe weird, right? Because we were talking about how there like wasn't a huge fervor or like a fan base for Metroid before this game came out, but they're still like making hardcore references to the original game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of feel like uh Super Metroid and then like Metroid Prime were on like the Metroid franchises are like on two like parallel paths in a weird way. Like
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's praised so much about Super Metroid is like its aesthetic and how much it like leans into that like aliens sort of thing going on. And then like the later Metroid games that Sakamoto has had a hand in, they've become a lot more like chatty. They've introduced like new characters where it's really like, oh, like what made Metroid and Super Metroid like so cool was that sense of isolation. And I
Yeah.
feel like Metroid Prime kind of like weirdly had the same trajectory where like the original Metroid Prime really captured that Super Metroid spirit of isolation. And then as the
Mm-hmm.
series went on, they were just like, and also here's some like Marines for you to talk to. And like, oh, like all that kind of stuff that
Yeah.
just like kind of, like almost like to me took away from the franchise.
Yeah, and like it is really interesting because like you do see it that like Prime both Prime well I guess yeah so Prime is very much like you find your own way, like you figure out your way around this place, and like there's a lot of reading if you want it, but like you don't have to read any of the scan stuff if you don't want to. um but like at the Zero Mission, which comes out the same year, is it Zero Mission first or Fusion first? I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
They came out right on top of each other, and they both start to like add that chattiness that you're talking about, right? Like Fusion has this like running commentary by like an AI that's trying to impersonate your like former commanding officer. So like it tells you where to go and opens up locations like based on where it thinks you should go next. So like yeah, there's this and Prime are sort of like the last like true bastions of that like Metroid is a game about isolation
Yeah,
feeling.
exactly. Also, I
Yeah.
looked it up. It looks like Fusion came out first, and then Zero Mission
Okay.
was later.
And Fusion, of course, is the latest game in the Metroid timeline that there is. We've never gotten past Metroid 4.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's true.
Um, all right. Mark, we mentioned the bosses a little bit, but we haven't mentioned the two like big bosses that are like the returns from the original Metroid, Ridley and Kraid. Um, he's super easy, but I love that Kraid fight. I
I do
love
too.
it's so because he's this enormous. It starts off huge, right? A full screen tall, and it's just like his bust basically, um, and you hit him a couple times, and then he stands up and is this multi-screen tall. Um, it's amazing that they can pull that off on the Super Nintendo, right?
I also for whatever reason that I like why does anybody fall in love with anybody, like how do you explain that attraction? I find
Right.
Kraid so adorable cuz is he grotesque? Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
But like
Does he
in
have
a
too many thumbnails? You bet.
But is he for whatever reason super lovable? Yep, that's Kraid. You just can't not like the guy.
Oh, okay. There's another, and it's not like a boss. I think it's like a mini boss or something that I also find adorable, who is objectively horrifying. it is, it's the thing that you fight right after you get the power bombs and then you go back into Norfair. It's this big red thing, right? He's like squat and he's got like three rows of eyes on his head, and you have to like knock him into like a
Oh
lava
yeah,
pit
yeah, yeah.
that you can't actually deal damage to him. You can only ever knock him back. I always find that thing to be adorable.
Well, I also like that encounter because again, it's like something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a different type of. I don't know if it's a boss. I think you're right. It might just be like a mini boss encounter. But yeah, it's just like a different way. You're like, oh, I can't just like uh like super missile this thing to death.
Right.
There's like an additional layer of strategy on top of it.
Well, and then again, this is a point for the for just like the presentation is that once you knock him into this lava pit, you watch as his flesh melts from his bones as it comes up screaming over and over again, and then you're like, all right, great, that thing's done, and then you like run off to the other side, and then it knocks down a wall, and you just see its skeleton like amble forward and collapse in
Yeah,
front
and
of
it's
you.
like death throes. Yeah, that whole
Yeah,
encounter is so cool. Um, but okay, before we get to I want to like compliment sandwich this thing. And so
yeah,
here in the the middle, I just kind of want to like slide in my big
the
critique of the game
criticisms.
and
Yes.
where I think like it definitely shows its age. It's just limited by the Super Nintendo controller, and that is cycling through your like items is
Yep.
such a chore, especially when you're trying to like switch between things quickly, right? Like at the end, you have to kill all of the Metroids. And like to me, the easiest way to do that was like I'll freeze them and then I will use like a super missile and just like blow them up. But then having to like cycle between those things, unless there's like some trick that I don't know about where it's like, okay, I have like the just my regular gun out, I'm gonna freeze them, and now I hit select twice to get to the super missiles, and then I hit select 4 times so I don't have the super missiles selected anymore. That part is infuriating. Are you about to tell me there's a quick way to do this?
There's a quick way to do part of it. You can go back to your regular gun at any time by hitting Y.
What?
Yeah. So if you have missiles selected and you no longer want missiles selected, you don't have to push select to get to super missiles, select to get to power bombs, select to get to grapple beam, select to get to X-ray scope, select to get to regular weapon. You just hit Y.
No.
But even still, it is too much. I also found this time, and again, this is a game that I love with all my heart. Um, that I could not believe how annoying the X-ray scope is.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
that like you, and when you use it, you necessarily stop moving, as does everything else. Everything just freezes. But you have to pull it out and then point it at the surface that you want to. Like it should just be a thing where like it's another button on the controller or something where you just push L and R at the same time and it just like sends out a beacon and anything that you can interact with just like lights up, and you know what I mean? Like it
Mhm.
should be so much faster than it is, and it shouldn't slow you down in nearly the same way that it slows you down.
And I hated, hated, hated the grapple beam. I hate the grapple beam.
Okay, all right. I will hear your criticism of the grapple beam, but I also want to say first that I don't think there is a 16-bit game that gets this mechanic right, because it is weird in Super Castlevania. It is bad in that Mickey Mouse game that also has like a grapple beam. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Castle of Illusion or something.
I think Castle of Illusion was the Genesis one.
We'll
Well,
never know.
oh yeah, we'll never know. But
um,
go. Yeah.
well, okay, so like I, for whatever reason, and maybe it was maybe it's just because again, like I played Super Castlevania way more than Super Metroid. The kind of like grapple beam esque using your whip to like grab onto things and then like swing back and forth in Super Castlevania, I like now does not phase me at all. And so I'm imagining maybe that's what it was like for you with the grapple beam.
Oh, interesting.
But like coming to the grapple beam now, like I, as soon as I got super jump, I could not, or space jump, I could not have been happier. Except trying to
Mm.
space jump vertically is very complicated.
Yeah, it has a that's another one where like the window for when you push the jump to like get a jump on top of your jump is weirdly specific.
Mm-hmm.
That like if you try to do it too early or like at the literal apex of the jump, it doesn't work. That she needs to be like on her way back down. And you know, heaven help you if you should accidentally not do like the cartwheel jump, then you're just falling back down. I believe it's the Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse. I believe is
Oh,
is what
okay.
I
I don't know
yeah.
that I've ever played that one.
It's fine. It's got one level where you're using a grappling hook, and here's the thing. Here's the real thing is that I don't think like the Super Nintendo is simulating physics in some way that doesn't totally track. Like the number of times that I would be trying to like get Samus to launch herself at like a 90-degree angle and go like up and to the right and just get her to launch like straight up with the grapple beam, it's so much. It happens all the time. It feels really unreliable.
What did you play it on? What hardware did you play it on this time?
I played it on the Super NES Classic. Where'd you play?
I played on the Switch, so I guess basically what we did for A Link to the Past. For A Link to the Past, there is so little use for it doesn't Link to the Past does not require like very specific movements, right? It's not like really
Mm-hmm.
timing based. And so there were times playing this game where, yeah, probably wish I would have played on the SNES Classic and using a real SNES
A
controller.
real Super Nintendo.
Uh-huh. Like
Yeah,
having like the
and that
D-pad for that type of thing.
that helps it a little bit. And like the having the select button be like just mildly more accessible does help. This is one of the few games where the select button feels like an action button, right? Instead of like a menu thing or like something that you're gonna have to dig through. Like you have to use it all the time. Yeah, this game just needed more buttons or something.
I do want to we brought it up last week, but I do want to give a shout out to the game manual that you can find online, and we've included the
Mm-hmm.
link in the show notes. It has like this really cool map of the planet Zebes.
Oh, cool.
It's like cut like an ant farm, and so you can get an idea of what you're into or what you're getting into, and then you know that when you hit Meridia, you're just in for a bad time. Like it just doesn't look fun, even on the map.
Here's okay. Here's what I will say one great thing about Meridia, because there is one phenomenal thing about Meridia, and it is the way you first enter it. It is a tube that you have been running through a lot in the early game because there's a lot of backtracking, and it's during like a part that like it's almost a figure eight that like you have to keep running through this area to like loop around here and then loop around another area. But it's this tube, and you can see outside that it's like a watery area, and you get into it by setting off a power bomb in this tube, which again, if you don't know that that's what you're supposed to do, I don't know how you ever come to that. I don't know how I came to it originally. But like the environment destructs and suddenly you're in like a new space. It's an insanely cool moment in that game.
It is
um
very cool.
but then you got to actually play the section is full of like fish and music that's like too creepy for its own good.
Yeah, I feel like so to me like the legacy of Super Metroid, I 100% understand why this game like captured the imagination of so many people and why
Mhm.
Super Metroid is like the basis for an entire genre of, especially now, like there are so many like indie games that like riff on the ideas of Super Metroid. But it's also like such a great example of why like that franchise has always been, or like that genre has always been a little bit difficult for me, because again, like it is so predicated on backtracking. It's so predicated on you wanting to explore the map and like being willing to like be lost. And that's for me personally, like the way I play games, that's a really difficult like hump to get over.
Yeah, totally. And it is another one of those games because like I see like those same flaws in it, right? That like one of the things that I like about it is that I feel lost and overwhelmed and like I need to explore the space. But I also know that I have like a little bit of a cheat built in, knowing that I know how to get through it. So like when I try to envision what my ideal Metroid game is, um, like do I really want to feel like lost and overwhelmed in a new game? Like is that what I actually want? And then when they give me a Metroid that is too straightforward, I'm like, no, this isn't what I want. So like I feel like this my experience with this game sets me up to have a weird relationship with this series going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think playing this again, you really like I appreciate now kind of how much they've painted themselves into a corner with the Metroid franchise because
Yeah.
I don't know what you do. I feel like Metroid Prime was an amazing effort in kind of like rebooting the series and bringing it back to those Super Metroid roots, but they ran into the same problems that the like whatever you want to call it, like mainline Metroid franchise did, where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
but then like if we want this to be anything than it is, we have to make it more accessible. And I feel like the Game Boy Advance games have done the best job of threading that needle, but people hate it. Like
Yeah. Well, but I mean, like, I think Zero Mission does a good job of threading the needle. I think Fusion is too far on the side of guiding you through it. It's still a very good game, but like, yeah, it for me it feels like too handholdy. It feels like a piece with Metroid Prime 3, right, where there are like all these other characters, all these other voices and stuff.
yeah, and I mean,
Um,
and definitely like Fusion. Whatever you think of the game, I like it a lot, but it definitely sets the stage for Other M and like the bigger
mhm.
problems with Other M.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%. It's also like, we say that like, yeah, Prime came along and like kind of reinvented or like rebooted this sort of feeling, and so the gap between those, uh Super Metroid was 94 and Metroid Prime was 2002. We're only talking 8 years. It's been 18 years since Metroid Prime, right? Like, we're in such a like, whatever happens next with Metroid, um I mean, I don't want to say it's like going to be a make or break thing for the franchise, but it needs Metroid Prime 4 needs to establish a new like direction, new priorities, and just like establish itself as somehow separate and somehow also carrying on the legacy of these these amazing games.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like the more I think about it, and even just talking about it tonight, I feel like Metroid Prime 4 almost. I will be curious if it is actually Metroid Prime 4 or if it
Yeah,
ends
me
up
too.
being like a new starting point for the series, a new take on what Metroid can be, almost like a reboot of the series because it's been, like Metroid Prime 3 came out in 2007, and I know we just got the remake of Metroid 2 for the 3DS. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but like that and that is an interesting game in and of itself. With the way it tries to like thread the needle between approachability and like being a little bit more combat focused. I don't know. Like Metroid is such a weird series that
Oh,
I,
here's the thing. If Samus Returns was on Switch, it would have been a hit. Like, changing nothing, it would have been a hit, right? Like, people would have been into it, they would have played it. I think a lot of its legacy is going to be tied up in the unfortunate fact that it was on the 3DS when we were all done playing 3DS.
I mean, I think it's sold pretty well.
Sure, it
By
would have
all
killed
but
on Switch.
by all accounts, and like who knows, maybe Mercury Steam is working on something for Switch right now. To me, I feel like the real like reason that the remake was kind of controversial was because of its emphasis on combat. Where it's just
Hmm.
like there was so much like stop, block, shoot, like in a way that the other 2D games didn't really have that kind of emphasis. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just another point where it's like, look, I don't want this, so fingers crossed. But like, at what point are they kind of like Star Foxed, or is Metroid like Star Fox or F-Zero, where they're like, I don't really know what else we do with this?
I mean, it's a good point. You said Prime 3 was however many years ago it was, and Metroid Other M was a full 10 years ago. So like, even like the effort to like bring the series back again, that we're 10 years removed from. So, and like the only things that we've seen, hey Mark, we are leaving out Federation forces, of course.
You're right, of course. Uh huh.
But yeah, it's a fascinating series to like consider, and like the sort of posts of like the game of the series being good are so good, right? And so like solid, and Super Metroid is really like where that starts. Um, and it's just like I don't know. It's one of those things where you're like, I don't. Can this be replicated in a way that can still be exciting? And the answer is I have no idea.
Yeah, I have no idea either.
So, Mark, what do you say? Is this a game that you recommend to someone who has no nostalgia for it in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same recommendation, honestly, that I did for Link to the Past, where it's like, use a guide. And because I think it's totally worth it. I think it is worth experiencing, but 100% use a guide.
This I actually again I love this game. I have a little bit harder time recommending it than I do Link to the Past. I think Link to the Past feels more modern now than Super Metroid does. So like I obviously I love this game more than most people in my life. And it's amazing and it's part of me. But like you have to recognize it as an old game, right? That it has some like outdated modes of interacting with it. That select button's a real problem. Meridia's a real problem. The wall jump, which is tough to do, can be super useful, but like you can also play the whole game without ever figuring it out.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. Like A Link to the Past to me, I don't think has ever been surpassed by any of the like kind of like indie games that were inspired by it, but I definitely feel like there are those Metroidvania games that I have enjoyed more than Super Metroid.
Do you have one like in mind that you're
Yeah,
thinking
I
of
mean,
that?
just offhand, like immediately, it's not exactly Super Metroid, but like SteamWorld Dig 2. I
Hmm.
loved that game. And like it has a lot of like the mechanic where you're like diving down into an area, you don't know where you are, but they make it so much easier for you to get back to the surface. Like the map is better. The sense of like space and exploration is much clearer what your like objectives
Mm-hmm.
are. I really, really like that game.
Yeah, and like I enjoyed the heck out of the last half of the Messenger, which I know like you didn't like stick around for. But like as that game opens up and turns from a Ninja Gaiden game into a Castlevania Metroidvania game, like it's great at it too. Like again, giving you a real sense of like what all these map areas are and a useful map and fast travel, all that kind of stuff that this game just, oh, if only it came out 20 years later. All right. Well, Mark, let's close up this part of the conversation. I would love to hear everyone else's experience with this game. If there is anything, if you played it in the past before and now find yourself either like recognizing some flaws that you didn't when you were younger, or if you're like, no, the game is still perfect, which I would also understand, please write into us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at
At
gmail.com
gmail.com.
and let us know. Or if you have anything to say about Yoshi's Island, which we're doing next week. Mark, just real quickly, like tease it a little bit. What do you feel super close to that game? Are you going to use a guide? How are you feeling?
I don't think there's any point in using a guide for Yoshi's Island, but I'm not super close to it. I'm really excited to play it again.
Yeah, me too. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like this episode, you can share it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you share stuff. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MK Mitchell, and the show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying thank you for listening.
That's right, Nintendo Cartridge Society listeners, what is going down?
Are you ready for a promo?
Let's do yoga. Let's get fit.
Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Muriel.
And we're the hosts of Hella in Your 30s.
A podcast about a cool couple trying to do adult stuff.
So each week we invite you to join us as we try to learn things we should probably already know, like how does a stock market work? Can we install that bidet? Why are all of our houseplants dying?
This is a podcast for people of all ages because remember,
age ain't nothing but a number.
But being hella in your 30s is a state of mind.
So tomorrow's a new day. Let's order pizza.
Campfire.